So, I'm going to try to go ahead and sum up for anyone paying attention that's been trying to, I guess, kind of piece together what I've been trying to say and sum it all up. Um, the only way to explain what's currently going on and the only for public consumption, would basically be to say there are a few different hospitals that are going and trying to argue of which was to blame because ultimately, when you end up having somebody who sepsis ended up setting in throughout their whole leg, all right, to the point of having to set up a dam intravenously to block off the blood flow, all right? So ultimately, the side of the foot, bottom of the toes, all the way to the bottom of the toe, no feeling, not there. While going ahead and explaining, so how do you explain a procedure that basically made a dam, um, prevented the spreading of the infection to go ahead and slow the rate of deterioration, ultimately signs of muscular dystrophy, as well as neuropathy, nerve damage, actually nerves killed, and basically go ahead to explain. So it was kind of an amputation, kind of not an amputation, kind of not a well-known procedure to most people, which, by the way, medical gatekeeping, anybody that goes ahead and profiteers on that, shame on you. All right? But also saying, yeah, the factor that you have a hole in your thigh that you go ahead and stick literally up to there in the hole in the thigh. Like, literally, right there. Literally right there. Alright? That's not a hole that everyone has. Not exactly an easy thing to be able to show or explain during determinations for disability, as well as x-rays showing been walking with a broken jaw for a very long time, and traumatic brain injury, blood on CAT scan and MRI, without having to explain how things got this far, without any type of haste being used to attempt to mitigate the long-term damage, but because of with how long been slow walked, there's no way that at the very least the left leg isn't going to need amputation because the start of the infection point is at the upper thigh. So it's kind of like, how do you explain? Well, imagine explaining to anybody that you're an amputee, but you're not an amputee because technically you still have the limbs on you, but technically they're more decorative than functional, if you know what I mean. So, um, but going ahead and doing that actually slowed the rate of the infection, which is rapidly and repeatedly, because of little pockets stored under the abrasion point that just seems to go ahead and keep blistering, popping, scabbing, blistering, popping, scabbing for years on end. Which basically is just the doorway for sepsis. And basically being like, yeah, ultimately, no coordination because can feel every muscle at the bottom of where there's supposed to be an arch while simultaneously not being able to feel anything. Explaining to anybody neuropathy, it's like you feel the pain, but you feel the pins and needles. You feel it there, you know it's not there, you know it's not going on, but it is at the same time. Alright, ironically enough, for an amputee with the way they would end up feeling phantom limb syndrome, where it still feels like their limb is still there during the psychological adjustment period of adapting to the adjustments and accommodations needed to adjust to what will be their new normal going forward. That is a weird limbo to be in, you know? Not to mention that, but when it comes to legal culpability, there's a lot of finger pointing and everything. Well, ironically enough, any hospitals or any groups or companies or insurance or organization that it's their responsibility within the disability determination process to go ahead and gather the medical records, and we are talking from a lifelong span, to come to a determination. That is a lot of things that get revealed, and a lot of the times, a lot of those things that end up getting revealed end up going ahead and contradicting police statements that ended up being used to try to fend off, like, for example, Child Protective Services. So, it's a very delicate matter and sensitive position for anyone to end up being in, While at the same time, if it looks like I'm having a good time, I'm really not. This is dragging the hell on. And the factor of the amount of instigation that there is over and over and over again to try to drag out the legal process, it's like, hey, imagine if, parallel, legal investigations were going on, all right, or civil investigations. But they've basically dragged from the point where you were somewhere between 6 and 9 and attempting to go ahead and to relitigate, while simultaneously those inconsistencies not showing up, while having to handle a legal matter that involves medical autonomy and bodily autonomy, while at the same time going ahead and putting it in a deposition and submitting it in a court of law also does end up going ahead and making it a public record, which ultimately means that in the matter, the amount of privacy while handling a matter this delicate, while doing everything possible to not miscalculate, is a difficult hair to split. Very difficult. So, and I understand too the reason for slow walking also when it comes to the license situation is somebody's trying to send the message, no, we're going to keep you stationary until you show enough sympathy to show that regardless of how much physical damage you've gotten in the process of trying to delegate along the way, while simultaneously most people jump into physical altercations before words are even able to be said and assumptions are made. And basically sitting by waiting, being like, hey, do I get my chance to try to get as much figured out as I can? Because I feel like there are a lot of people that are forgetting that there are a lot of things that are so far out of my control. So ultimately, trying to go ahead and show for the last year of like, hey, there's opportunity. If anything apparently is declared as a weapon, then ultimately that means that nobody is allowed to own anything due to the factor of its capacity or capability to be used as a weapon. So trying to go ahead and tie that correlation is not a good idea. Well, also the factor that despite even having tools to be able to heighten a escalation situation to lead to a permanent ramification, the factor that I have not done so means that regardless of how tempting with the level of frustration, poking and prodding on a consistent basis that option may be, It's also acknowledged it is not a good option that leads to any good results. And I feel like there are way too many people that get way too short-sighted on that. And I'm just like, hey, imagine somebody trying to tell you you have some fucking nerve going ahead and trying to make decisions for yourself, or complaining about the factor that I'm not allowing you to make decisions for yourself because, in your opinion, every decision that I've ever made is just absolutely a stupid one, while simultaneously not wanting to acknowledge when you set unrealistic expectations, of course somebody's going to fall short of them. If you haven't passed that threshold that they're aspiring to, to reach for, if you can't understand it because you've never been there or you're not in their shoes, then you don't get to make that call, you know? And when it comes to the whole obsession with the legal profession, yeah, the catalyst of drive to go ahead and follow through, that was done by the whole, you should be a lawyer. Well, being ready to just throw me to the court to end up getting ran the hell through. Let me tell you, that fucking meat grinder ain't fun. But then, after all that is said and done, and pretty much your attitude was, prove it. Prove me wrong. I'm backing up every statement that I'm making. Now, who are you to tell me to prove it? What obligation do I have? But anyway, the point that I am getting to is about to be 35, at about 35 years old, for somebody to try to use a legal process to try to make that statement while saying, you can't prove me wrong, while simultaneously being like, all right, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my stance. I'm going to go ahead and you said words. Words are a weapon, So at the same time, you said you want diplomacy. Don't complain when I end up going ahead and talking hours upon 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 hours to go ahead and show the factor that I'm too busy talking. One of my hands is holding a phone. One of my hands is free. What am I doing with my free hand? Doesn't make a difference. I could be doing that. I could be doing that. Ultimately, whoever wants to look at it, it's directed to them. That's on them. Anyway, when it comes down to the actual handling and end result of those matters, people trying to prod and intrude while trying to figure out how to get that bandage ripped off and get everything coordinated in that matter, while simultaneously knowing that saboteurs, pretty difficult task to accomplish when you're surrounded by people that don't want you to meet your goal, And as far as driving aspiration, I'm pretty sure it's kind of laughable to say that someone has a lack of a sense of direction when literally as in elementary school, whenever they had to go ahead and have their textbook, they would go ahead and buy book covers for themselves with the Princeton logo, with dreams of one day getting a law degree from Princeton or getting an engineering degree from MIT. So, ultimately, it's one of those, from what I've seen from my generation, aim and aspire as high as I possibly can, recognize the mortality rate of my generation, be happy I have a pulse, and natural selection has said Don't know how you've passed so far, but you keep passing, so keep going.